Now, one conversation that I find very interesting began to brew as Florida were being crowned champions. The question remains, does this title for the Florida Mutineers count as a major championship? Now, for those that don't understand the terminology, I don't blame you, right? We have minor tournament wins and we have major tournament wins. We also have world championships that also are considered major tournament wins. Sadly, in Call of Duty, due to the lack of conversation, these tournaments have begun to blend together, right? Some people don't know one from another. Some people don't understand the difference between one particular tournament versus the next. And I don't blame you for not knowing that. I really don't. I don't blame you for not understanding because it very much makes sense. What defines a major championship, right? These are the questions. What defines a major championship? Should online events be in consideration? If not, right, if not all 12 teams are in attendance, is it truly a major? Now, the reason why this matters is that championships all funnel into legacy, right? The greats in Call of Duty history have all won tournaments, right? They've all won majors, and most of them have won world championships. Now, many don't know this, but I have been discussing this terminology thing for years now. I can remember for the last 3 seasons, at the start of each year, I always discuss this exact same subject, and I did it at the start of this season as well. We need to figure this out, right? We need to figure out the major versus minor difference because if not, we're going to get so caught up in the different tournament details that we'll start to forget one from the next. We'll forget the little minor details of what was one event previously than to what is one now. Now, to be honest, when we were doing the CDL on LAN, I went back and forth constantly about whether or not these tournaments should count. But I want to get this out there. This is what I said when the conversation first formed, and this was before COVID-19 impacted the CDL. The first CDL season will always have an asterisk next to it. Obviously now with COVID, but also because not every team is there at events to compete. What happens if the considered best team in the world doesn't attend an event, right? Can you call it a major then? Can you be considered a major champion if not every top team is in attendance? But I want to remind everyone of one thing. Years down the line, this really doesn't matter, right? Years down the line, we're looking 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons down the line. This doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, I get the current argument's sake because we're in this right now, right? I get why we're talking about this currently. But for the future, Call of Duty titles will be known as CDL tournament victories and world championships. There will be no conversation about major versus minor for the future. Franchising will eventually engulf old Call of Duty history so much that pros in future years will solely hold CDL championship victories. You don't believe me? So far this season, 10 players that have previously never won a major championship ever in Call of Duty history won a CDL event. Every team that's won so far this season had at least one player that has never won a major championship before. So when Florida and the rest of the players that have won for the first time, right, they're looking at their resume, do they put in that resume that they are a major champion, right? In terms of the resume, do they put that in the major championship area? I think they do. I do. I think that if you are Florida, if you are a player that has won so far throughout this CDL season, when you're looking at your resume, when you're kind of marking things down, do you mark the fact that you've won a CDL championship off the list? I think you do. I absolutely think you do. But with the realization that it doesn't mean as much as other CDL championships to follow. This competition that they are facing off against is major competition, right? Best teams in the world, best players in the world. But let me be clear. I'm not saying this is equal to future CDL championships. I'm saying that it belongs in the same circle. It belongs under the same title, the same category. Because for the future of the Call of Duty League, all the rest will count, right? All the rest of these homestands in year 2, year 3, so on, will count. We as a Call of Duty community need to realize that this entire year, not just with 8 teams, but with COVID, it has changed everything. It has changed for us. It has changed for sports as well. Everything is put on pause. We're entering a time period where everything is put on hold, right? Like I said, every sports league is put on a permanent wait. Now, I want to address a few things. The argument, well, MLG 2Ks that we've had previously, prior online tournaments, those should probably count if these do. What? No, that is not at all the same thing. These are different. The difference is that this is the only possible form of competition that we humanly can have. We have no choice. In online 2Ks, there was a higher level of competition that was available, right? We had major LAN tournaments that were constantly happening. Right now, you have no choice. This is the highest level of competition that can exist, right? The Call of Duty League is the highest that you can reach. It's not as if we have a league anymore, and then we have major tournaments and Columbus and Anaheim and Vegas. We don't have that anymore. And when I reference that we're going from LAN to online, LAN should count for more. Don't get me wrong on that. So let me make myself clear for the entire Call of Duty scene, because I'm tired of getting the same continuous argument. Our CDL events, meaning both LAN and online, are both CDL events, or rather are they in general, majors, right? Our CDL events, major championships. They are listed under majors for the record books and for player statistics. But these events are not the same standard that next year will be, or that actual prior majors were. So does Hook, Illy, Shotzi, Havoc, Mox, Envoy, Frosty, Skies, Major Maniac, Celium, do they get to add this to their list as a major? Yes, they do. But with the realization that while they did win, it doesn't mean as much as prior and future major tournament victories. The same applies to previous sports in the early seasons, right? When competition wasn't at its highest, Bill Russell, widely regarded as an 11-time NBA champion, they look back at those as a time of lesser competition. So that while he does have 11 rings, it doesn't mean as much as someone who recently maybe has 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, right? I mean, in terms of the GOAT conversation, people put in terms of championships kind of a lower amount versus his, and sometimes take the lower amount because of the difference of competition and because of the difference of time. Now, we in Call of Duty aren't saying that competition from a player's standpoint is weak, but that the format and the fact that we are online is making it more weak than it previously and in the future will be. This year has to count for something, right? But the only for sure championship that will have no question marks, no asterisks next to it, will be the Call of Duty World Championship. It will be the CDL Championship. As long as that is played on LAN, that is the only guarantee as a player that you have. End of discussion, right? That is where I finally end what has been a very frustrating topic for the last year, and one that originated many years ago. Now, in one of my last conversations about majors versus minors, I mentioned that we need to go back and see which championships count versus others. We need to set in place a particular criteria from top teams to time period, etc. All that needs to factor in so that we are all on the same page. Do I expect this to happen? No, I really don't. I'll be honest with you. I don't expect anybody to actually do this. And for that reason is why COD pros, if they actually care about their legacy, they need to ensure that CDL championships aren't the only thing that is considered for the future and the greatest player of all time conversation. Because if we never get this ironed out, and we start to look back at one championship from 2012 from this particular player, and it may get thrown out because of time period, it's going to cause problems. And it needs to get done End of story. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of us constantly discussing whether or not this counts. I think in terms of where these players sit, do you mark it under major? You do. But for the future, because this year has to count in some particular way, you put an asterisk next to it in some capacity to say, you know what? This was year one, right? This was the first year. It counts, but it is not held to the same standards that prior major tournament victories were, and that not future CDL championships can live up to. That's where I'm at. That's where I sit with it, and that's where I believe that the rest of the Call of Duty community needs to sit with it as well, because in my mind, that's internally the way that I'm going to think about it for the future.